Dabo Swinney over at ACC Media Days. I mean, he was on the main podium, and he spoke like Dabo Swinney normally speaks. Now, I happen to like him. I've been a big fan of the way Dabo carries himself. I'm not a big fan of the us against the world stuff all the time, even when you're favored by like 90 against most of your opponents. But I am a fan that he speaks his mind, and regardless of whether I agree with it or not all the time, he speaks his mind. Well, Dabo spoke his mind yesterday. And I called it Dabo After Dark if you were following on Twitter, because he got on there, man. He was throwing around some terms now. I don't even know if CBS allows us to say them on air, so I'm not. But he was speaking very much in what we would call a closed booster setting kind of vernacular. You know, the kind of stuff you can say on the back porch at the family reunion that probably is not best reserved for, I think it was Sirius XM with Luganville and the guys yesterday. But Dabo let it rip. At one point, he said slapdick. At one point, he said milk-bone underwear. He ran the gamut yesterday. Everything he ever heard growing up in and around Pelham, Alabama, he just took that barrel, he turned it upside down, and he let it all out. Who was he talking about? He was talking about DJ Uiagalelei, his starting quarterback. Or at least, if you open a preview magazine, the guy listed as his starting quarterback. Now, you and I both watched him last year. He struggled. Dabo admitted as much yesterday. It's impossible to say otherwise. Dabo's got like infinite amounts of confidence that he is going to bounce back this year. Now, this is where he and I differ. He gets to see him every day. I don't have this mountain of confidence that magically 6 months of not playing meaningful games is all of a sudden going to rectify some of the actual mechanical issues now. Listen to some of the quarterback guys out there talk. I don't expect you to trust me to break down a quarterback's mechanics. I wouldn't trust me to break that down. But there are some people out there equipped to do it, and you hear them on the record. Sometimes we get to talk to them off the record, and they'll tell you. They'll point out A, B, C, and D. And what it contributes to is a lack of poise and a lack of accuracy. And if you can't stay poised, I know offensive line was an issue last year. I understand that. But if you can't be accurate with the football, you're not long for that world. And that was a couple of the problems, actually, with DJ last year. Well, anyway, Dabo was talking yesterday, and he's talking about how all that's going to be rectified. This guy was an awesome true freshman, and then last year, yeah, he struggled, but then he listed all the reasons why he struggled. You may call them excuses. He called them reasons, whatever. We're going to find out this year is the whole point. This isn't fantasy football, or it's not a projection. How would DJ have done? The season's going to come. And I keep going to that first game against Georgia Tech. You know, we're in Atlanta right now. No one's talking about Georgia Tech here. Their lives, that coaching staff's professional lives are on the line, and they sold out the game. It was announced today. And I think it's at the Benz, actually, wherever they play the game. Can you imagine if after all this offseason hype, not outside, it's internal. That's the head coach there at Clemson talking. If after all of that, I'm pulling for the kid now, but if he can't follow up and follow through on that, and it's like 13-9 midway through the third quarter, and it's just this absolute clunker, I don't think people appreciate how radically this thing can turn on a dime. From months and months and months of talking about how DJ's going to have a bounce-back year to all of a sudden, we got this guy named Cade Klubnik on our bench. We didn't have him there last year. And when are we going to pull the trigger? Like how long, or short rather, is the leash this year? Because it was as long as you could imagine last year. There was no option on the sideline. There is this year. That's what my mind keeps going back to. It's great to have supreme confidence in your guys, and I'm sure it did nothing but boost the confidence of DJ Uiagalelei when he heard his head coach talking about him like he did yesterday. I don't have a problem with it because I know eventually football is going to happen. And so talking is irrelevant at that point. But I will say, if you don't follow through on, as a player, what your head coach said yesterday, there's going to come a time in the season where there will be a change at quarterback. And if your results don't follow up in a 10-win or better kind of scenario, there's going to be a lot of looking back. And here's what that's going to sound like. Hypothetical land now, but here's what it sounds like. If Clemson is a 3-loss team again, let's just say worst case, 3 or 4-loss team, here's how December would sound. They would play the sound bites from Dabo from yesterday, and they would ask, how did this guy have such supreme confidence in a player that ended up being not much improved from what we saw last year, or God forbid if he's worse than what we saw last year? And they'll say, how did Dabo Swinney not see that? Because, at that point, you'll have a lot of doubters who were on record as saying DJ's not going to be good, and they'll be pointing back to their own proclamations in the summer and saying, even I saw that it wasn't going to be a good year for Clemson. How did Dabo not see it? And then the overall credibility factor will be called into question. This is how this happens, okay? That's why coaches, for better or for worse, a lot of times play it close to the vest in the preseason. Well, Dabo chose a different tact. It's great to believe in your guys. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm just telling you, there's a pro and a con to that. And the con, if things go downhill, is your own words get turned against you about 4 months from now. So let's hope for Clemson's sake it becomes irrelevant.